Hey everyone, I'm joined today by Mike Kunkle, VP of Sales Effectiveness Services at SPARXiQ and a driving force behind modern sales foundations. Mike, thanks for being here.
Hey, you're welcome, Scott. That was just like my mom wrote it. And you get extra points for being able to say Sparks IQ.
What do people say?
We get everything SPARX IQ, Spark IQ. I don't know why it's that difficult, but we get a bunch of different things.
Uh, I'm glad I got it right on the first try, so appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about modern sales foundation. So, what led you to develop that alongside your work at Sparks IQ?
Well, there's a journey here. So I'll start by saying when I got into this profession many years ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth and we read by candlelight, I was doing something I called top performer analysis. And I'd go into organizations, my employers at first and later clients, and I would study what the top performers and sellers and frontline sales managers did differently. And I was looking at the top 1 to 4%, but also, the rest of the 16% below that 4%. So the top 20 in total. But I divvied that up and I documented what was it that was making a difference for them. And I did this over about 16 years, 12 different times. And I kept seeing these same patterns emerge. So I developed a sales methodology that was full cycle, covered everything from prospecting to opportunity management to account management. It was very buyer centric because that's the behavior I saw from the top performers. It was consultative in nature. I was working mostly with B2B complex sales, so consultative in nature, sort of a mix of value selling and outcome selling. And really made a massive difference when people learned it and, used it. And so I think it was probably in October or November of 2018. I was at a conference and I saw David Bowders, who's SPARXiQ's CEO, talking about some negotiation training that he built to complement strategic pricing, because it's one thing to do strategic pricing and figure out what price should the sales reps be charging. It's quite another thing for them to negotiate to get that price, right? So they started there, and I saw this training and my jaw dropped because it was incredibly high quality video, like it was filmed in Hollywood, which I learned later it was on Hollywood type of film. And it was episodic. And some of them were like watching a instructors in a classroom interact with a class. Some of it, you were seeing these little vignettes or episodes of two people negotiating. I thought, wow, that is really cool. And I talked from stage about coaching there at that conference. And I don't know, 2, 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from David Bowders. And we start talking, and we started talking about a partnership and me bringing some of my content to life through SPARXiQ's approach to episodic binge-worthy sales training. And at the end of it all, he made me an offer that I couldn't refuse, and we joined forces. So a gentleman named Doug Wyatt, who's left and boomerang back to State Industrial in the interim, but Doug and I worked as partners to build this methodology course for SPARXiQ. And we called it Modern Sales Foundations. It has 26 different modules, 2 videos per module, and it's all really built based off of that top performer analysis that I did and Doug's experience over, I think, 10 years in industrial distribution and B2B selling and sales training. And so we blended that stuff together into what we call MSF, because it's a mouthful to say Modern Sales Foundations. And we said, okay, how do people really learn? How have I seen over the years organizations implement training effectively? And we built it very differently. And so with these 26 modules, sales reps take them week by week by week. And so we prepare the managers over 4 different sections. It's divided into core principles, prospect development, opportunity management, and account management. So managers go through all the videos, they meet with us, we help them understand the content and validate that they get it and feel comfortable with it. And we help them understand this thing called a manager support guide, which helps them run weekly meetings to reinforce the training module by module. So then the reps start taking the training, managers meet with them at the end of the week. When they get through one section, we do the same thing for the next section. So the thing rolls out over about 34, 35, sometimes 36 weeks, radically different than what typically is done in the marketplace. And we've had phenomenal results with it, um, kind of like those before and after pictures of weight loss, right? I'll clarify that for clients who actually take our advice on how to implement it effectively, how to work it into the business and workflow and culture, how to coach to it long term, we have seen everywhere from 12 to up to 35% lift in sales results. And it's probably the most fun when a cautious company initially does an implementation in a pilot and they train some people but don't train the others. And then we see the trained people start to far outperform the others. And then, of course, we go on and do the rest of the company. But I got to tell you, seeing my IP in that format, right? Where's my hat? You got a hat. I need to have a hat for a
Yeah,
second.
throw your hat on.
We created a fake company called Airco Solutions that sells high quality air filtration. And the videos in the first video, there's two different parts to it. One part is a host and another host, two co-hosts, running sort of like a late night television show, and they and their guests introduce the concepts. Then we see the Airco team, which is a salesperson, three salespeople, and the sales manager. I'm sorry, sales manager, three salespeople, and the sales manager's mentor. We see them interact with their clients and customers and using modern sales foundations or struggling with certain things, but eventually you always see Airco demonstrate what good looks like. And it's like 26 episodes of Seinfeld for sales, right? And so I got to tell you, it's such a blast to have my content that I knew worked over the years brought to life in a way that, look, I could have never brought it to life on my own that way. So I'm having the time of my life. Our clients are getting good results, and it's a ton of fun.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. A couple of things you said really stood out to me. Sales training is often very hard to get right and to make it sticky. So what I mean by sticky is like 2 months after the training is done, a lot of sales training programs are forgotten and they've fallen back into bad habits. So the things that I really like is you're getting adoption from the top down. So you're training the managers who then support the training of their representatives. And then the length of your program is a commitment that I imagine before the program even ends, they're seeing the good results of the training that they've been getting. So the fact that the training program is so long, it's really hard to lose that stickiness because they're sticking with it all the way through. So I really like the platform foundation basis that you've built for it. Sounds really cool.
Thanks, man. What's funny is that when they start, the managers are always kind of nervous about running these weekly meetings and using the guide and doing all that. And at the end of the program, I can't tell you how many have said to me, Mike, I never thought I'd hear myself saying something like this, but this has been really great. And by the way, we had our last meeting last week, and my team said, I don't want to stop. Right? They want to keep going. They want to continue having these meetings where maybe not every week something from the program, but they want to continue having these dialogues and discussions and practice exercises and role plays because they're seeing the difference in themselves and the success they're having, the money they're making. So that was a real pleasure. And one of the modules is called interpersonal communications. And I was a little worried about that because, salespeople all think, right? Hey, they're really great at communication and interpersonal skills. And I was worried what, especially some of the seasoned ones might say or think about that module. And it knocked me off my chair when we started getting this feedback that that was one of the modules that everybody really loved because it was telling them things that they pretty much already knew, but they weren't consistently doing. And they had no acronyms, language, format, model to follow to do some of this stuff. And we were giving them that as a way to help them remember to do it and and actually improve how they're doing it as well. So it's been a couple surprises along the way too.
You led me into my next question. Having not having a common language, not having a foundational, language to talk to with their reps. A lot of people are out there selling without a selling model. Even if they have a basic selling model that they referred to steps with a consistent language across an organization is a big step compared to some organizations. So my question is, what gaps were you seeing in traditional training that that wasn't being addressed before they come and see your training? What are some of the things you're solving?
So I think some of the bigger things is you've already pointed out, right? Is that training is an event and then they have to fight the forgetting curve, right? So I don't know the exact stats anymore, but over some period of time, 90 days, there's a large percentage of what was taught in event-based training that's lost. That's a huge gap, right? Another thing that's a gap, if you think about sales history and the stereotypical version of a salesperson, think about the phrase even objections or handling or overcoming objections. How combative is that, right? Do you know any buyers who want to be handled or overcome? Do you know any that are raising their hand and say, I object? It's crazy language that we've developed over the years, right? So we refuse to even use that. We talk about, hey, people have concerns naturally, and here's a process, a communication process you can follow to identify that root cause of that concern, to figure out what type it is, and then what you might be able to do to help them get past that, and then confirm that it did help resolve their concern. So, what we're really teaching is we're teaching salespeople more about how to think and behave than we are teaching them typical sales skills. Now, we know that gaining agreement is important. It has to happen or nothing gets across the finish line, but we don't call it closing because all of the stereotypical type of things that have built up around closing over the years. We talk about need and solution alignment. You have to make sure before you start pitching things, we don't use that word either, before you start making presentations or talking about products and solutions, do you know, based on great discovery, that you actually have the right solution for what they need? So, need and solution alignment. And then we joke that you can't launch a sale without NASA and ASA, right? So, we get a little corny from time to time, but it does help people remember. But that's a simple concept that's so powerful because once you have that and you know that you're a good solution to this client's problem, then you can use ethical influence and persuasion because you know you're acting in their best interest. And that's how we define buyer centric is you're operating in your buyer's best interest to help them achieve the things that are important to them. The other thing we talk about is this concept of multilingual selling. This is a big gap in the market. First of all, we talk about problem based selling, right? Where rather than pitching products, you check that they have the particular problems you solve, talk about outcomes you've helped other clients like them achieve when they've had those problems, briefly mention the solution, and ask if they'd like to explore more, right? And then when you're talking about solutions, try to understand what really matters to the other side, to that other person, right? Buyer centric or other centric. We talk about four value drivers. People have business value, they have experiential value. They're trying to improve an experience or a process or reduce friction. They have aspirational value, where they're trying to aspire to be something or achieve something. And then everybody's got personal skin in the game, so then there's personal value. And business value would simply be financial or operational metrics moving the needle. Well, if you know the value driver or sometimes drivers that really resonate with that person, you have to learn to talk about one product maybe four different ways based on who you're talking to. And I joke that that's multilingual selling, right? Not
I love that.
German, Spanish, Spanish, but if you can do that, that's a somewhat of more advanced concept. But I just don't hear people talking about these things. The other thing is buying process exit criteria, right? We call buying process exit criteria anything that a decision maker needs to see, hear, feel, understand, or believe in a stage to be comfortable moving forward to the next stage with you. Now, if you subscribe to this multilingual thing, let's say you're working with four decision makers, and let's say that in this stage, they all have the same exit criteria. That's great, but they still may have different value drivers, right? But they have the same things that they need to see, hear, feel, and understand and believe to be comfortable moving forward. In the next stage, those four people may have four different exit criteria or decision criteria for that stage. What do most sellers do? The same thing in every stage with everybody. And so these are big gaps in stereotypical selling today that when you help people start to shift perspective and look at selling differently as helping guide people through a buying journey to make the best possible decisions for them, it really starts to change everything.
So you talked about like the video series and training lasting 34 weeks. Throughout that process, how do you measure the effectiveness of the video-based training you're doing?
Yeah, this varies wildly by client. And when I go into an engagement, I usually talk to people and say, imagine that there's this sliding scale from 1 to 5. On 1, you want to provide some nice training to reward your people, help them feel great, give those that want to learn something some new skills. Over here on 5, you absolutely want a return on your investment. You want to see results and lift, and you want to know that it's working and working really well. And, there are, you would think, Scott, right, that everybody would be a 5, right? It's really not true. And so if they can tell me honestly where they are on that, we'll alter our approach a bit with them to make sure that their team gets the experience they want and they get the outcomes they want.
Yeah, very good.
Right? So surprisingly, very few people want our help at least with the monitoring, the measuring, the proving the ROI. Now, because Modern Sales Foundations, that business unit, is part of SPARXiQ, at SPARXiQ, we have strategic pricing programs. And because of that, we have access to all of the client's sales transactional data. So when we're working with a SPARXiQ client, as opposed to someone in a different vertical or outside of the SPARXiQ client base, we have access to all that data. So, and this is an important caveat, with their permission, we can then look at their transactional sales data before the training, during the training, or after the training, and give them a sense of what's going on, where's the lift, what's the result. And that's why I can say that, between 12 and 35% lift is not uncommon when we see clients who actually follow our advice on how to continue to implement to make it part of the culture, the way we do things around here, work it into workflow, coach to it over time. If you do those things, because the real work begins when the training program ends, if you want to continue to see results. We have some clients that see lift during the training, but they don't do the long-term reinforcement things and it starts to dive. We see others that work it into the culture and then they'll take sales coaching excellence or sales management foundations or other courses that help continue to support how effectively they coach and lead their teams. And then we see even better results.
So You're getting data with permission from the client to literally see the lift that you have. So how do you balance then analytics with practical application, especially if you don't necessarily see a lift that you hope to see by a certain point? What are
The approach that we use, and I really dislike this phrase, trust the process, but it's true that if the client does the things that we recommend, I have not yet failed to see a lift in performance. And keep in mind, we've been doing this at SPARXiQ for about 5, 6 years. I've been using much of this IP and methodology for 22, 23 years. I have not once seen a great implementation of this methodology fail to produce results. What I do see, and I can almost predict this up front based on the client's response and what they're doing, I can generally predict when they're not going to see great results. And I try to talk about those things up front. If you're doing manager training, for example, and no one is coaching the coaches, that's going to be a challenge. If you're doing sales training and it includes worksheets to fill out to prepare for call planning or discovery, and you're not reinforcing or coaching to the use of those, even if they might remember some of that stuff, they're not going to be using it consistently. So generally, you can see in advance and predict what's going to happen and where the wheels will come off the bus. And if you talk about those things up front without doing, I told you so, right, which no one wants to hear, right, you can have authentic conversations about those sorts of things on the other side when the results aren't happening. And if then they're serious and, in fact, want to get better results, then they can start to do some of those other things that will lead toward them.
let's change gears just a little bit and talk about some scaling or growth challenges you might be having. So, it sounds like you have a fantastic program, but obviously you're probably always self-analyzing. What aspects of the training program would you like to change or enhance or give a next level upgrade in the coming years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm working on something right now for modern sales foundations. I mentioned we give managers this guide called a manager support guide, and it's relatively easy to follow. It's written in common English and it tells them step by step what to do. But managers who haven't used a leader's guide, for example, as we call it in training, sometimes feel sort of uncomfortable about this. I'm creating a video right now of myself doing a demonstration, a talk through and a demonstration, section by section, of one of the modules in the program to help managers feel a little bit more comfortable. So as feedback arises about the program over time, those are the sorts of things that we try to do or add or layer in. We have another video that talks about the role of the manager as an interpreter now, and this was something that we built because if you remember, we're teaching Airco Solutions is doing all these demos. Well, if you have a company that's not selling high quality air filtration, then your team has to sort of translate or interpret, hey, here's what I saw on the video, and here's how I'm going to apply that in the real world at my company with my products, my customers, etc. We get a little pushback on that from time to time, but all the learning research shows that if you can get someone to step outside of their world, where they leave their baggage and bad habits and things behind, learn something new, and then take it back into their world, it's actually more effective than trying to just teach them from the beginning in their world. And that is very counterintuitive, and some people push back on that, but it works. But for that to work really well in the way that we implement, these managers who are running these meetings need to help play that interpreter role. And I don't think we made that clear enough in the beginning. And so then I created this other video talking to managers about that, showing them how they could do that, giving them advice on how to play interpreter role when their team wasn't connecting the dots on their own. We
Yeah.
do have worksheets that the reps fill out, before their team meeting with their manager. And the worksheet is designed to help the rep start that journey. Okay, how am I going to use this to prepare, for a sales meeting at my company or discovery with one of my clients? And then in the meeting with their manager, they talk about that, and the manager can coach and shape their responses, to the best possible response. But when the manager can't do that or doesn't feel comfortable or hasn't connected the dots themselves, that can be problematic, right? So we've started to do things to adjust for that. Those are generally the things we're doing. The other thing I'd say that some of the courses like negotiation or relationship building course we've got were built before I got there and we did modern sales foundations. And so they didn't all have the same materials to support them. And Modern Sales Foundations, keeping with the Hollywood theme, we have something called show notes. Well, show notes is just basically a content summary of that module. Then we have the worksheets. Then we have the manager support guides. Well, the earlier programs like negotiation didn't have all that. So now we're going backwards and we're building out similar type materials. It's not exactly the same, but at least similar. There's a content summary. There are some worksheets, and those other programs aren't rolled out as long a time frame as MSF because negotiation is a 6-week course. It's much smaller, smaller modules. Relationship quotient, relationship building for B2B sales, also smaller. So, you know, coaching is rolled out over about a quarter. Sales management foundations about a quarter. Negotiation, relationship building, 6 months. We have a free virtual selling mastery program and a couple of others, but primarily that's the big stuff in the curriculum. And we're trying to equalize now across all of those so that even though the programs are built a little bit differently because of when they were designed, the clients are still getting a similar experience and similar support materials. So that's the way we've been trying to handle that.
So how has like client acquisition changed since you launched the business?
Yeah, so a lot of SPARXiQ in wholesale distribution with strategic pricing, probably the most effective channel for many, many years was events. And there are a lot of distribution events. The electrical sector has their own, and fluid power has their own, and there are a lot of different verticals: plumbing, HVAC. And then there's some master events like NAW or the National Association of Wholesale Distributors. So Sparks IQ was out in all of these and continues to do that, where they market not only strategic pricing, but the training side of the business and another company we own now called Trade Hounds, which is a social media app for the trades business. And so that's still a fairly effective channel. We are also migrating toward, obviously content marketing. We've been doing that now for 4 or 5 years, especially on the training side, publishing thought leadership or articles, blogs. We're doing ads now, CM and, more SEO on the sites. The websites are being redesigned now. So it's really becoming more of a full cycle inbound and sales outbound approach, probably more than it has at any point in the past, based on how the business has evolved and, of course, how our markets have evolved and tools have evolved.
Yeah, cool. We're in 2025 now, and the big buzzwords these days are AI. My last training conference I went to, uh, almost every booth had some kind of AI fill in the blank, AI role play avatar, AI data analytics, you name it. There's an AI driven solution.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the AI driven world? How are, if at all, are you all using AI in your day-to-day business?
Yeah. So the product with the biggest focus on AI and machine learning is something we call Sales GPS. And if anyone's familiar with the world of wholesale distribution, many of the distributors have literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of SKUs. So when you have that across a fairly large territory as an account manager, you could spend hours and hours trying to analyze this business and where to focus your time to grow your territory. Or you could use a tool that gathers all of the information about your customers, like customers, starts comparing even in your customer base. What are like customers buy versus other like customers? Where are the gaps? What might you be able to upsell and cross sell to whom? Where is your business with certain accounts declining and you need to get out there and reactivate or recover that? It really is a prescriptive use of AI and machine learning to analyze these massive amounts of data that would take a person forever, and they still might not get it all or get it right. And so that's a pretty cool product. And and seeing the way that we're using AI and machine learning on that is a real blast, and that ties closely to our training because if again, like I said about negotiation and pricing earlier, it's one thing to know what price you should get. It's another thing to go negotiate it. And it's one thing to know you have a cross sell or upsell opportunity or have to go recover a particular account. But then if you understand modern sales foundations, there are things you can pull out of the program to help you go do that. And so it makes a really nice tie between the pricing and analytics side of our business and the training side of our business.
Yeah, cool.
On the training side, we're not doing anything specifically with AI yet. I sort of like that Bill Gates quote that everyone overestimates the short-term use of technology and underestimates the long-term impact, right? And I think that's true with AI today. I see a lot of poor AI in use, and then every now and then I come across something pretty darn impressive. But what I'm watching right now are the AI role play bots and vendors. And there are a couple that I've been watching for a couple of months now. And I just learned that one of our other LMS partners has some of that technology. So we're exploring that. I'm not ready to lay a bet down on any one at this point to really integrate them with all of this training that we've built. But that's probably the next thing I could see us doing in training, at least with AI, is creating scenarios where sellers can practice and more than they'd be able to, let's say, with their manager. Or I know for a fact in our sales coaching courses that many times those managers are not getting coached. So what if I could put them in scenarios where they had a coaching scenario and it was being able to assess how well they were using what they've learned and provide feedback. So that's probably our next step with that. And I'm just right now trying to figure out which vendor do I really want to bet on to do that with.
What are you looking forward to most over the next couple of years?
I'd say that the untapped potential on the training side of the business really excites me. The training industry, as you know, Scott, is really a red ocean, right? There are a bunch of large players, and then there are probably thousands of smaller players. So breaking into it is sort of a slog. And, we're going through that journey now. We've landed some, several billion-dollar clients. We've got a lot of middle market, couple of SMBs, and we're starting now to gain traction in the market as they're starting to recognize the Modern Sales Foundation's brand and what's different about it. So that for me on the training side is the most exciting thing is I think we've just begun to get to the point where we're going to be able to really scale. On the SPARXiQ side, there's so much really with the analytics that that team is able to do to help companies, not just with strategic pricing, or as I mentioned, with sales GPS, like prescriptive advice on a territory, but also on so many other things like, you know, getting cost control over things in distribution, knowing where the money is going and what you can do about that, getting freight cost under control. So many different things can be looked at with analytics and AI that I think that's going to be really life-changing for distributors, where the industry profit margins are generally 3 to 4%. And then we can come in with pricing and add 200, 400 basis points to that 90 days, and then start looking at some of these other profit enhancing initiatives. There's just a ton of potential, I think, on that side. And, I'm not involved on the trade hound side, but we grew to about 400 tradespeople on this app. And now we're bringing in vendors on the other side, putting the vendors and the tradespeople together. Going to be a ton of potential in that over the next couple of years. So I'd say the future is bright, and I'm really excited to be involved, especially on the training side of it.
And that sounds awesome. If people want to get in touch with you to learn more about your solutions for either company, where can they find you? What are your websites? How do they get a hold of you if they want to talk to you specifically?
Sure, probably the easiest thing for me is go onto LinkedIn and search for Mike Kunkle, Kunkle. Or if you just Google Mike Kunkle in sales, I own like the first 10 pages. I've been around so long. SPARXiQ, you get extra points if you can spell. It's SP as in Paul, ARXIQ. SPARXiQ.com is the website. And for the training side of the business, modernsalesfoundations.com. And those are the best ways to get in touch with us.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for joining the podcast. Appreciate your time. Really enjoyed talking with you and the insights you shared today. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Scott. It's been a blast for me, too.
Thank you.